For thousands of years, humanity has looked upon death not as an end, but as a doorway, a threshold to something beyond our understanding. Across cultures and centuries, we have built monuments to the departed, crafted resting places that speak not only of loss, but of hope, mystery, and the unshakable belief that there is more to existence than what we see. These tombs, these silent cities of the dead, hold secrets that have tantalized explorers, historians, and dreamers for generations. They are time capsules, frozen moments where art, faith, and human ambition collide in ways that still leave us breathless with wonder. Today, we're setting out on a journey to explore 25 of the most enigmatic burial sites ever discovered, places where the line between history and legend blurs, where questions outnumber answers, and where the echoes of ancient beliefs still seem to whisper from the stones. From the shadowy depths of Egypt's Valley of the Kings to the mist-shrouded mountains of Peru, from the submerged tombs of forgotten emperors to the cryptic symbols left behind by cultures that vanished without a trace, each of these sites tells a story that is as haunting as it is unfinished. They challenge what we think we know about the past, and in doing so, they invite us to look closer, to wonder deeper, and to remember that every grave is not just an end, it's a riddle waiting to be solved. So come with us as we step into the world of ancient mysteries, where every stone has a story and every silence speaks volumes. This is more than a list. It's an invitation to explore the unanswered questions that have endured for millennia, to walk in the footsteps of those who came before us, and to uncover the astonishing legacies they left behind. Whether you're a history enthusiast, a lover of mysteries, or simply curious about the profound and the unexplained, what lies ahead will captivate your imagination and leave you seeing the past and the passage beyond in a whole new light. And so we begin our journey at the very apex of ancient funerary achievement, with a structure so iconic that it has become synonymous with mystery itself, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Believed to be the final resting place of the 4th dynasty pharaoh Khufu, this is the sole survivor of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a colossal feat of engineering that has captivated humanity for millennia. But to call it merely a tomb feels almost insufficient. This was a machine for resurrection, a celestial stairway designed to launch a god-king's soul directly into the heavens. The statistics alone are enough to stagger the mind. Originally standing at 481 feet tall, it was the tallest man-made structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. It's composed of an estimated 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. That's like stacking the entire population of a large modern city, each person holding a small car, into a perfectly symmetrical mountain. The precision with which these blocks were cut and placed is what truly defies belief. The 4 sides of its base are aligned to the 4 cardinal directions with an error margin of just a fraction of a degree, a level of accuracy that would be challenging to achieve even with today's GPS technology. This astronomical connection runs even deeper. The pyramid's descending passageways were precisely aligned with the pole star Thuban, which held a sacred position in Egyptian cosmology. The so-called air shafts emanating from the king's chamber point directly towards specific constellations like Orion, which was associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. This was not just a building, it was a stone calendar, a sacred compass, and a cosmic map, all converging into one structure, which leads us to the question that has haunted archaeologists and engineers for centuries: how was it actually built? The conventional theory suggests a massive workforce using ramps, sleds, and levers, but the logistics are mind-boggling. How were these multi-ton blocks quarried, transported across the Nile, and then lifted to such incredible heights with such perfect precision using only copper tools, ropes, and human muscle? This gap between the presumed technology and the finished product is where alternative theories flourish, from the use of lost ancient technologies to even more speculative ideas involving external influences. Perhaps the most tantalizing mystery of all lies in what we haven't yet found. In recent years, advanced muon radiography scans have revealed the existence of several large, previously unknown voids within the pyramid's core. These are not small gaps, but significant, inexplicable spaces deep within the stone. What are they? Could they be hidden chambers, perhaps even the true, still-sealed burial chamber of Khufu himself, untouched for 4,500 years? Or do they serve some other, entirely unknown structural or symbolic purpose? Each new scan brings more questions than answers, ensuring that the Great Pyramid, for all its fame, guards its deepest secrets as jealously as ever. Yet for all the grandeur of the Great Pyramid, our next stop takes us to a tomb that is, in many ways, its exact opposite. Not a towering monument to immortal glory, but a hidden, almost forgotten crypt whose discovery would send shockwaves around the world and forever change our perception of ancient Egypt. We are speaking, of course, of the tomb of the boy king Tutankhamun. While the pyramids were plundered in antiquity, Tutankhamun's final resting place remained almost completely intact, hidden for over 3,000 years beneath the debris of later tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Its discovery in November of 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter, backed by his financial patron Lord Carnarvon, is the stuff of legend. After a long and fruitless season of digging, Carter's team uncovered a single step cut into the bedrock. This led to a stairway and finally to a sealed doorway stamped with the seals of the royal necropolis. What happened next is one of the most famous moments in archaeological history. Carter made a tiny hole in the doorway, lit a candle, and peered into the darkness. When Lord Carnarvon asked if he could see anything, Carter's reply was breathless. Yes, wonderful things, and wonderful things they were. The antechamber was packed to the ceiling with a breathtaking jumble of artifacts: golden chariots, intricately carved alabaster vessels, beautifully crafted furniture, and statues of guardian deities. It was a time capsule from the 18th dynasty, a chaotic collection of everything a pharaoh would need for the afterlife, but the greatest treasure lay behind another sealed doorway. There, within a series of 4 magnificent gilded shrines, each nestled inside the other like a set of Russian dolls, was the king's sarcophagus. Inside that was the most iconic archaeological find of all time: Tutankhamun's solid gold death mask, a masterpiece of ancient artistry that has become the eternal face of pharaonic Egypt. But the discovery was soon shadowed by a chilling narrative: the curse of the pharaohs. The legend was ignited by the untimely death of Lord Carnarvon just a few months after the tomb was opened, the result of an infected mosquito bite. Sensationalist newspapers of the era were quick to pounce, claiming he was a victim of a mythical curse inscribed on the tomb's wall. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. While no such inscription was actually found, the story took on a life of its own, fueled by a string of other deaths and misfortunes that befell people connected to the excavation. Modern science, of course, offers more plausible explanations, from ancient sealed pathogens to the simple statistical probability of unrelated events. Yet the power of the curse myth endures, a testament to our enduring fascination with the idea that the ancient dead might still hold some power over the living. The contents of the tomb also presented a deeper, more human mystery. Who was this king, and why was his burial so different? Tutankhamun was not a great warrior or a long-reigning monarch. He was a boy who ascended the throne at the age of 8 or 9 and died suddenly just a decade later. CT scans of his mummy reveal a young man with a club foot, likely requiring the use of a cane, many of which were found in his tomb. He also suffered from malaria and may have died from complications following a severe leg fracture. Furthermore, evidence suggests his burial was a rushed, almost haphazard affair. Some of the finest objects, including his magnificent golden mask, show signs of being altered for him at the last minute, their original inscriptions changed to bear his name. This has led many Egyptologists to believe that much of the treasure was never intended for Tutankhamun at all, but was repurposed from the burials of others, possibly even his immediate predecessors. His tomb itself is surprisingly small for a pharaoh, more akin to a noble's burial, leading to the theory that his sudden death caught the royal court completely off guard, forcing them to use whatever was available for a hasty interment. The boy king's magnificent treasures, therefore, may tell a story not of planned opulence but of frantic improvisation, making his undisturbed survival for millennia all the more incredible. But if the tomb of Tutankhamun offered a glimpse into the intimate and hurried affairs of a single pharaoh, our next enigmatic site presents a vision of power on an almost unimaginable industrial scale. We travel now from the sun-baked valleys of Egypt to the heart of ancient China, to a tomb that is not a single chamber but an entire subterranean world, created for a ruler who didn't just want to be remembered, he intended to rule for eternity. This is the mausoleum of the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, and its most famous sentinels, the Terracotta Army. The story of its discovery sounds like something out of an adventure novel. In March of 1974, a group of farmers were digging a well near the city of Xi'an in Shaanxi province. Their shovels struck not water, but something hard and strangely shaped the fired clay head and torso of a life-sized soldier. They had inadvertently unearthed one of the greatest archaeological finds of the 20th century. What they found was merely the tip of a vast underground spear. Subsequent excavations revealed not just a few statues but thousands of them, an entire military division frozen in time, buried in orderly combat formation within massive underground corridors. The scale is simply breathtaking. Estimates suggest there are over 8,000 soldiers, each one life-sized and astonishingly unique. Look closely at their faces, and you'll see a multitude of different expressions, hairstyles, and even ethnic features, leading experts to believe they were modeled on actual soldiers from the emperor's real army. But the infantry are just the beginning. This clay host includes cavalrymen with their horses, archers kneeling ready to fire, and charioteers holding the reins. It was a complete military force, complete with over 130 wooden chariots and more than 500 horses, designed to serve the emperor in the afterlife. The craftsmanship is what truly separates this army from any other ancient artifact. These were not mass-produced from a single mold. Each figure was built using an assembly line process, with torsos, limbs, and heads created separately and then meticulously joined together. After assembly, artisans added the fine details by hand, ensuring that no two soldiers are exactly alike. They were even originally painted in vivid, lifelike colors, pigments that, tragically, began to flake and fade almost immediately upon exposure to the dry air, a loss that modern archaeologists are still working to prevent. Yet for all we know about the terracotta warriors, they are merely the guardians of the outer walls. They are the protective force stationed in the pits surrounding the main event, the emperor's tomb mound itself, which remains sealed and unexcavated to this very day. Ancient historical texts written about a century after the emperor's death describe the main burial chamber as a microcosm of his empire. They speak of a breathtaking underground palace with ceilings inlaid with pearls to simulate the stars and rivers of flowing mercury representing the great waterways of China. The emperor's sarcophagus, they claim, floats upon this quicksilver sea. This is not just ancient poetry. Modern scientific surveys have indeed detected unusually high concentrations of mercury in the soil around the tomb mound, providing a tantalizing and somewhat alarming hint that the ancient descriptions may be more than just legend. This presents archaeologists with an immense and sobering dilemma: the technology to safely excavate such a site, with its potential toxic hazards and the near certainty of catastrophic damage to incredibly fragile, organic artifacts like silks and lacquerwares, simply does not exist yet. To open the tomb would be to destroy it, So, for now, the central mystery of China's first emperor remains locked away, protected by his clay army and by the wisdom of modern science, which understands that some secrets are better preserved than exposed. Leaving behind the silent, unopened tomb of China's first emperor, we now turn to a search for a grave that is, in many ways, the exact opposite. A tomb that was once one of the most famous and visited sites in the ancient world, a place of pilgrimage for Roman emperors and generals, only to vanish completely from the historical record. The final resting place of Alexander the Great represents perhaps the ultimate cold case in archaeology, the disappearance of a body that was more famous and politically powerful in death than most people could ever be in life. Alexander's story after his death in Babylon in 323 BC is a sprawling epic in itself, a bizarre and tumultuous journey that reads like a political thriller. He died suddenly at the age of 32, leaving behind a vast empire with no clear successor. His body, initially placed in a simple gold coffin, immediately became the ultimate symbol of legitimacy. The general Perdiccas, who took temporary control, knew that whoever possessed Alexander's remains would wield immense authority. He ordered a magnificent funerary carriage to be built, a rolling temple on wheels, to transport the king's body back to his ancestral homeland in Macedonia. But this plan was hijacked. Ptolemy, another of Alexander's generals who had secured the rule of Egypt, intercepted the funeral cortege and rerouted it to Memphis, the ancient Egyptian capital. This was a brilliant, calculated move. By seizing the body, Ptolemy was not just grabbing a trophy, he was laying claim to Alexander's legacy and connecting his own rule to the god-kings of Egypt's pharaonic past. The body was eventually moved to the city Alexander himself had founded, Alexandria, where it was placed in a magnificent tomb known as the Soma, or body. For centuries, the Soma was a major tourist attraction. Julius Caesar visited it to pay his respects. The Emperor Augustus, after conquering Egypt, is said to have accidentally broken the nose off Alexander's mummified body while laying a wreath. The later Emperor Caracalla visited, leaving his own ring and tunic, and then, around the end of the 4th century, the historical trail goes cold. A series of disasters struck Alexandria: tsunamis, earthquakes, and rising sea levels, and the precise location of the Soma was lost to time, buried beneath the modern metropolis. This disappearance has fueled an obsession that continues to this day. The search for Alexander's tomb has become a historical grail quest, with theories placing it in locations all across the Mediterranean. The most persistent theory, of course, centers on Alexandria itself. Over the decades, numerous excavations have claimed to find tantalizing clues, from a mysterious alabaster tomb in the city's ancient royal quarter to a spectacular sarcophagus discovered in the basement of a Greek Orthodox church. None have provided conclusive proof. Other theories are far more speculative. Some suggest his body was moved for safekeeping before the great disasters, perhaps to the Siwa oasis in the western Egyptian desert. This was the site of the famous Oracle of Ammon, which Alexander visited early in his reign and which reportedly confirmed him as the son of the god Zeus Ammon. Proponents of this theory argue it would be a poetically fitting final resting place, returning the son of the god to his divine father. Yet extensive archaeological surveys at Siwa have turned up no evidence to support this. Another compelling, though less mystical, theory posits that the body was never lost at all, but was simply misidentified. In the late 19th century, a magnificent late-period mummy was discovered in a cache of royal pharaohs in Luxor. Dubbed Alexander's sarcophagus due to its Greek-influenced artwork, it was quickly determined to belong to the pharaoh Nectanebo II. However, some modern researchers have revisited this idea, wondering if a later Ptolemaic ruler might have moved Alexander's remains for safekeeping, hiding them amongst the bodies of the very pharaohs he was now seen to equal. The truth is, the search is complicated by the very nature of Alexander's significance. Finding his tomb would be the archaeological discovery of the millennium, but it would also be a political and cultural earthquake. The modern nations of Greece, Egypt, and North Macedonia all have a powerful claim to his legacy. His tomb would instantly become a site of immense national pride and international pilgrimage. This immense weight of expectation, combined with the utter lack of definitive clues, ensures that the hunt for Alexander's final resting place remains one of history's most captivating and frustrating mysteries, a ghost that continues to haunt the shores of the Mediterranean. This sprawling necropolis, hidden in the arid hills on the west bank of the Nile across from Thebes, represents a profound shift in royal burial strategy. After the Great Pyramid stood as glaring beacons for tomb robbers for centuries, the pharaohs of the New Kingdom decided that obscurity was the best defense. They abandoned the colossal, sky-piercing monuments in favor of hidden, underground labyrinths carved deep into the heart of the desert mountain. The choice of location was no accident. The valley is dominated by a peak with a natural pyramidal shape, linking it symbolically to the solar god Ra and the concept of resurrection, while its remote, labyrinthine passages offered a very real, practical secrecy. The tombs here are masterpieces of subterranean architecture, far more complex than simple holes in the ground. They were designed as descending corridors of belief, a literal journey into the underworld. Architects and workers toiled for years, cutting through solid limestone to create a series of halls, chambers, and shafts that descended hundreds of feet into the earth. The walls were then covered from floor to ceiling with some of the most exquisite and detailed art ever produced in the ancient world. These were not mere decorations. They were functional maps and guides for the pharaoh's perilous journey through the 12 hours of the night, a voyage where he would battle serpents and demons to be reborn with the rising sun. Spells from the Book of the Dead, the Book of Gates, and other funerary texts were meticulously painted to provide the king with the knowledge and power to navigate these dangers and achieve eternal life. Despite this clever shift to secrecy, the valley was ultimately a failure in its primary purpose, to protect the royal remains. With the exception of the miraculously overlooked tomb of Tutankhamun, nearly every single one of the over 60 known tombs was plundered in antiquity. The very workers who built these secret vaults often became the sources of their betrayal, leaking information to the sophisticated gangs of thieves who operated in Thebes. These weren't simple grave robbers, they were highly organized criminal networks that included corrupt officials, policemen, and even priests. Papyrus records from the time detail spectacular tomb robberies and the trials that followed, painting a picture of a constant, brazen battle between the authorities and the thieves who systematically stripped the valley of its vast wealth. Yet the story of the Valley of the Kings is far from over. It remains one of the most active archaeological sites on Earth, and the belief that it has given up all its secrets is a common misconception. New tombs are still being found. In 2005, the first new royal tomb since Tutankhamun's was discovered. Designated KV-63, it turned out to be a cache of embalming materials. Just 1 year later, KV-64 was located, a small tomb belonging to a chantress of Ammon. The most electrifying recent discovery came in 2022 with the announcement of the beginning of excavations on what is being called KV-65, a promising new shaft and chamber system that has yet to be fully explored. The potential for another major discovery still simmers just beneath the sun-baked surface. The work today is less about treasure hunting and more about forensic archaeology, using cutting-edge technology to see what the naked eye cannot. Ground-penetrating radar, electrical resistivity tomography, and drone photography are now standard tools, allowing researchers to scan the bedrock for hidden voids and chambers without ever lifting a pickaxe. These technologies have revealed several tantalizing anomalies that suggest there are still undiscovered tombs and chambers waiting to be found. The most famous of these potential discoveries is the ongoing search for the lost tomb of Queen Nefertiti. Some prominent Egyptologists have theorized that her burial place may be concealed behind the painted walls of Tutankhamun's own tomb, a theory that has sparked both intense excitement and vigorous debate within the academic community. Whether this specific theory proves true or not, it underscores a thrilling reality. The Valley of the Kings, for all its history of exploration, is still a place where the next groundbreaking discovery could literally be just around the next corner, waiting in the silent darkness for its story to finally be told. Leaving the sun-scorched valleys of Egypt and the sprawling tomb of an emperor, we now journey to a place of mist-green hills and a different kind of wonder entirely. Far to the north, in the rolling Boyne Valley of Ireland, stands a monument that challenges our very perception of prehistoric times. This is Newgrange, a massive circular mound that is, unbelievably, 500 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza and 1,000 years older than Stonehenge. Built over 5,000 years ago by a Neolithic farming community, it is not a crude pile of rocks but a breathtakingly sophisticated passage tomb, a testament to a society with immense engineering skill and a profound connection to the cosmos. From the outside, Newgrange is a stunning sight. The entire structure is encircled by a curb of 97 massive stones, but the most famous is the entrance stone. This is not a simple block. It is a masterpiece of megalithic art covered in a complex series of spirals, lozenges, and concentric circles that have baffled interpreters for centuries. These are not random scratches. The spirals may represent the journey of life, death, and rebirth, or perhaps maps of the other world. They are a language in stone, a message from a people whose voices are lost to time, leaving only these cryptic symbols for us to decipher. The true genius of Newgrange, however, is hidden within. A long, narrow passage lined with immense orthostatic stones leads deep into the heart of the mound. This corridor is not straight. It gradually rises as you walk inward, leading to a central cruciform chamber with a soaring corbelled vault roof. This roofing technique, where each layer of stone slightly overlaps the one below until the space is closed at the top, is an architectural marvel. It has kept the inner chamber perfectly dry and intact for more than 50 millennia, a feat of engineering that would be impressive even today. But all of this serves one extraordinary, almost magical purpose: to capture the sun. Above the entrance is a small, square opening known as the roof box. For most of the year, it leaves the inner chamber in profound darkness. But for a few precious minutes around the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, something miraculous happens. As the sun rises, a narrow beam of light penetrates through this roof box, creeping slowly down the passageway until it dramatically illuminates the central chamber, flooding the intricate carvings on the back wall in a golden light. This event lasts for approximately 17 minutes before the chamber returns to darkness. The implications of this are staggering. It means the builders of Newgrange possessed not just advanced architectural and engineering skills, but a deep, precise understanding of astronomy. They could accurately track the solar year and pinpoint the solstice with incredible accuracy, then design and construct a massive stone monument to physically manifest that knowledge. This was more than a tomb. It was a temple, a clock, and a cathedral all in one. It was a place where the community could gather to literally witness the triumph of light over darkness, to be reassured that the sun would return and the cycle of life would begin anew. It represents a world view where the boundaries between the living, the dead, and the celestial forces were intimately connected, all orchestrated within a single, silent stone structure that has waited 5,000 years for us to begin to understand its secrets. Leaving behind the ancient astronomical wonders of Newgrange, we now set sail across the Mediterranean to the coast of ancient Caria, in what is now modern-day Turkey. Here we find a tomb so magnificent, so dripping with artistic genius and architectural audacity, that it earned a place on the ancient world's most exclusive list and gave its name to all large, monumental tombs that would follow. This, of course, is the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, a wonder built not for a god king of Egypt or a divine emperor of China, but for a mortal man and his extraordinary sister queen. The story begins with Mausoleum, a satrap or regional governor who served the Persian Empire in the 4th century BC. But Mausoleum was far more than a simple administrator. He was a ruler with grand ambitions. He moved his capital to the coastal city of Halicarnassus and set about transforming it into a gleaming metropolis, fortifying it with strong walls and gracing it with public squares, theaters, and temples. He was a man who understood the power of image and legacy, and nothing would cement that legacy more than the tomb he planned for himself and his family. Upon his death in 353 BC, the project was taken up and completed by his wife, who was also his sister, Artemisia II. In the custom of the Carian royalty, marriage between siblings was practiced to keep the royal bloodline pure, but the historical accounts suggest their bond was one of genuine love and formidable political partnership. Ancient writers like Cicero and Valerius Maximus tell of Artemisia's profound grief, claiming she mixed her husband's ashes into her daily drink so that she might, in a literal sense, become his living tomb. While this is likely more legend than fact, it underscores the depth of her devotion. She threw herself into completing the monument, ensuring it would be a testament to his greatness and, by extension, her own. Tragically, she died just 2 years after him before the structure was entirely finished, but her craftsmen saw the project through to its completion, honoring their patron's wishes. And what a monument it was! The mausoleum was a breathtaking synthesis of architectural styles, a deliberate fusion of Greek, Egyptian, and Lycian elements that reflected the blended, cosmopolitan world Mausoleum ruled. It rose from the city center in a series of tiers, creating a staggering pyramidal symphony of stone. The entire complex sat on a massive rectangular base, itself a veritable fortress of marble, which formed a podium for a colonnade of 36 towering Ionic columns. These columns supported a roof designed as a stepped pyramid, and crowning this magnificent structure was the piece de resistance, a colossal, intricately carved marble statue of a 4-horse chariot carrying likenesses of Mausoleum and Artemisia. But it wasn't just the scale that made it a wonder, it was the art. Artemisia spared no expense, hiring the 4 most celebrated Greek sculptors of the age, Scopas, Bryaxis, Timotheus, and Leochares, each assigned to decorate one side of the building with intricate friezes and freestanding statues. These weren't mere decorations, they depicted spectacular scenes from Greek mythology, including a breathtaking centauromachi, a battle between lapiths and centaurs that brought the stone to life with a violent, dramatic energy. The entire monument was a sprawling open-air gallery, a celebration of artistic prowess that turned a tomb into a destination, drawing visitors from across the known world. For nearly 16 centuries, this unparalleled wonder stood as a testament to human ambition, surviving the conquests of Alexander the Great and the rise of Rome. Its ultimate downfall came not from armies or looters, but from the earth itself. A series of devastating earthquakes between the 12th and 15th centuries shattered the stone structure, toppling the columns and sending the legendary chariot statue crashing to the ground. By the 1400s, the once great mausoleum was little more than a magnificent ruin. The final chapter of its physical existence arrived in the late 15th century when the Knights of St. John invaded the region and used the ruins as a quarry to build a mighty crusader castle. They burned the remaining marble sculptures in kilns to make lime for mortar, systematically dismantling one of the 7 wonders of the world to fortify their own walls. Today, only the foundations and a few scattered fragments remain in Bodrum. Some of the finest surviving sculptures, including statues believed to be of Mausoleum and Artemisia themselves, were rescued by British archaeologists in the 19th century and now reside in the British Museum, silent, stone witnesses to a lost wonder. The mausoleum's legacy, however, is unshakable. Its very name became the word for any large, imposing tomb. ensuring that Mausoleum achieved the immortality he so desperately sought, not through the survival of his bones, but through the enduring power of a single magnificent idea. While the mausoleum at Halicarnassus was a deliberate spectacle of personal glory built above ground, our next discovery takes us to the opposite extreme, a burial hidden for millennia beneath the desert sands, one that revealed a civilization so ancient it was nearly mythical. In the late 1920s, British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley made a find in the heart of modern-day Iraq that would stagger the historical world and forever change our understanding of early civilization itself, the Royal Cemetery of Ur. Woolley was excavating a vast cemetery complex in the ruins of the Sumerian city of Ur, the legendary birthplace of the biblical patriarch Abraham. What he began to uncover were not simple graves, but deep, stone-lined pits known as death pits. These were the tombs of Sumerian royalty from around 2500 BC, a time when the Great Pyramids of Egypt were still centuries from being built. The wealth contained within was beyond anything anyone had associated with such an early period. He discovered exquisite artifacts made of gold, silver, lapis lazuli, and carnelian, a magnificent golden helmet of a king named Mescalamdug, intricate daggers with hilts of lapis and gold, elaborate headdresses made of golden leaves and beaded ribbons, and one of the most famous objects from the ancient world, the Standard of Ur, a mosaic-covered box that depicts scenes of war and peace. Dazzling shell and lapis lazuli, but it was the nature of the burials themselves that was most shocking and haunting. These were not solitary interments. The kings and queens of Ur were not laid to rest alone. Woolley uncovered clear evidence of a ritual that seems jarringly brutal to the modern mind, human sacrifice on a grand scale. The main chamber would hold the body of the royal figure, often surrounded by priceless treasures, but the entrance ramps and adjacent chambers were filled with the carefully arranged bodies of their attendants. In the most elaborate tomb, that of Queen Puabi, Woolley found a veritable court of the dead. There were soldiers wearing copper helmets, still standing in rank with their spears by their sides. There were female courtiers adorned with elaborate golden headdresses, arranged in rows as if they were attending a ceremony. There were chariots, each with a driver and a team of oxen. There were harpists, their hands still resting on the strings of their instruments, which were decorated with the magnificent gold and lapis lazuli head of a bull. The eerie order of these scenes suggested something crucial to Woolley. This was not a massacre or a forced execution. The participants appeared to have gone to their deaths willingly and peacefully. There were no signs of struggle or violence. His theory, based on the evidence, was that these retainers voluntarily drank or were given a poisonous sedative, perhaps a potent mixture of opium and hemlock, and then lay down in their appointed places to accompany their ruler into the afterlife. They were not victims in the traditional sense, but willing participants in a profound cultural and religious belief. The idea that a ruler's power and status in this life would continue into the next, and that their court must follow them to continue their service for all eternity. This discovery provided an unparalleled and deeply unsettling window into the world of ancient Sumer. It revealed a society with a rigid, extreme social hierarchy, one where the divide between the ruler and the ruled was absolute, extending even beyond death. The craftsmanship of the treasures demonstrated astonishing artistic sophistication and a vast trade network that stretched from the Indus Valley for carnelian to Afghanistan for lapis lazuli. But the death pits also spoke of a world view where the boundary between life and death was more permeable, and where service to the divine monarchy was the ultimate purpose, a duty that did not end with a last breath. The royal tombs of Ur stand as a breathtaking testament to the birth of luxury, power, and civilization itself, but they also whisper a darker story about the price of absolute belief and the human cost of immortality. Among the grand and often terrifying spectacles of ancient royal burials, the final resting place of Cyrus II of Persia, known to history as Cyrus the Great, stands out for its profound and moving simplicity. After the death pits of and the colossal Pyramid of Giza, we arrive at a monument that speaks not of overwhelming power, but of enduring legacy and a different kind of majesty. Located in the plain of Pasargadae in what is now Iran, the tomb of Cyrus is a surprisingly modest yet utterly distinctive structure. It consists of a single, gabled chamber sitting atop a stepped platform of 6 receding tiers, built from massive, finely cut blocks of pale limestone. It resembles not a palace or a temple, but a simple house, a timeless design that feels both humble and profoundly dignified. This architectural choice was deeply intentional. Cyrus was the founder of the Achaemenid Empire, the largest the world had seen up to that point, stretching from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River. He was a conqueror of unprecedented success, yet his philosophy of rule was revolutionary. Unlike the Assyrian kings who preceded him, who ruled through terror and brutal subjugation, Cyrus presented himself as a liberator and a benevolent ruler. His famous Cyrus Cylinder, often called the first charter of human rights, boasts of his policy of restoring displaced peoples to their homelands and allowing them to worship their own gods. His tomb, therefore, reflects this ethos. It is not an imposing structure designed to intimidate or deify, but a personal, almost private memorial that symbolizes a ruler's connection to his people and his land, a house for eternity. This unique approach to kingship is precisely what earned Cyrus the profound respect of one of history's other greatest conquerors, Alexander the Great. Over 2 centuries after Cyrus's death, Alexander marched into Persia not just as an invader, but as an admirer. He was a student of the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who would have taught him about Cyrus as an exemplar of virtuous leadership. When Alexander reached the sacked and desecrated royal capital of Persepolis, he gave orders that one site was to be left untouched and protected, the tomb of Cyrus at nearby Pasargadae. The ancient historian Arrian records the scene when Alexander arrived at the tomb himself. He found it had been broken into by looters who had scattered the few artifacts inside and desecrated the king's remains. Alexander was said to be filled with indignation and sorrow at the sight. He ordered the tomb to be restored and the body of Cyrus to be reinterred with all due honor. He personally inspected the interior of the chamber, which was said to hold a golden bed, a table set with drinking vessels, a gold coffin, and various ornaments and robes, simple treasures fitting the simple space. He then had the door sealed once more, leaving his own seal upon it. This act was more than just paying respects to a fallen warrior, it was a powerful political statement. By honoring Cyrus, Alexander was positioning himself as the legitimate heir to the Persian Empire, not its destroyer. He was embracing Cyrus's model of multicultural, tolerant rule, a philosophy he would desperately try to implement as his own empire fractured under the weight of its own expansion. The tomb of Cyrus, therefore, is more than just a building. It is a symbol of an idea of power that values wisdom and magnanimity over brute force, an ideal that captivated the greatest military mind of the ancient world and ensured that a simple stone house would be remembered as one of history's most significant graves. Descending now from the grand, sunlit tombs of kings and emperors, we journey to a place of profound and intimate mystery, a sanctuary carved not from stone but from the living rock deep beneath the earth. On the tiny Mediterranean island of Malta, a discovery was made at the turn of the 20th century that would challenge our understanding of prehistoric Europe. This is the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, a labyrinthine underground complex that is at once a necropolis, a temple, and an enigma wrapped in silence and shadow. Unlike any site we have explored so far, this was not built. It was excavated with painstaking care over centuries, a negative space of awe-inspiring complexity created by removing an estimated 2,000 tons of stone to form a three-level subterranean world that descends over 30 feet into the Maltese Globigerina limestone. The scale of the hypogeum is breathtaking. Its halls, chambers, and passages mimic the architecture of Malta's above-ground megalithic temples, complete with carved stone portals, corbelled ceilings, and elaborate red ochre spirals and patterns painted on the walls. It is a mirror world, a deliberate recreation of a sacred temple complex intended solely for the dead and the rituals that surrounded them. The bones of an estimated 7,000 individuals were found within its chambers, interred over more than 1,000 years during the Neolithic period, around 4,000 to 2,500 BC. But to label it simply a mass burial ground is to miss its true, eerie genius. This was a place engineered for an experience, one that engages a sense we rarely associate with ancient ruins, the sense of hearing. The most astonishing feature of the hypogeum is its acoustics. Specific chambers within the complex possess powerful and bizarre sonic properties. The most famous, the so-called oracle room, is a small, carved niche that transforms sound in ways that seem to defy physics. A deep male voice speaking or chanting into this space produces a haunting, reverberating echo that resonates throughout the entire lower level of the complex. The sound doesn't just bounce, it amplifies and seems to emanate from the walls and floor themselves, creating an overwhelming, omnipresent vibration that can be felt physically in the bones. This is not an accident. Modern acoustic engineers have studied the chamber and confirmed it was precisely carved to create a resonance frequency that aligns with the vibrational frequency of the human brain. In essence, the room itself is a tool capable of altering states of consciousness, inducing feelings of trance, heightened awareness, or even fear. One can easily imagine a shaman or priest using this effect to make the very stones speak, their voice transformed into the booming command of an otherworldly presence during sacred rituals. This potential for mind-altering ceremony connects to another deeply puzzling discovery made within the hypogeum, a collection of elongated skulls. Among the thousands of remains unearthed, a number of skulls exhibited a pronounced, unnatural elongation of the cranium. For decades, this fueled speculation about an unknown, elite race or even extraterrestrial visitors. The more mundane, though no less fascinating, explanation is that this was the result of deliberate cultural modification. Cranial binding is a practice known in many ancient cultures, from the Mayans to the Huns, where an infant's soft skull is tightly bound with cloth or wooden boards to create an elongated shape as it grows. This was often a mark of status, beauty, or a way to signify a person's belonging to a specific priestly or ruling class. In the context of the hypogeum's acoustics, a compelling theory emerges. Perhaps this physical alteration was not just for appearance. Some researchers suggest that such a modified skull structure might have made these individuals more susceptible to the vibrational frequencies within the oracle chamber, granting them a heightened or unique experience during rituals, literally wiring them to better communicate with whatever forces the ancients believed resided in that underground world. When you weave these threads together, the immense effort of its construction, the thousands of burials, the psychoacoustic architecture, and the modified skulls, a picture emerges that goes far beyond a simple tomb. The Hal-Saflieni hypogeum begins to look like a university of the soul, a Neolithic gateway designed to facilitate the journey into the afterlife. It may have been a place where the living descended to commune with the dead, where initiates underwent sound-induced visionary experiences, and where a priestly class, physically distinguished by their elongated skulls, acted as intermediaries between this world and the next. Its carefully engineered atmosphere of sensory deprivation and overpowering sound would have been utterly terrifying and profoundly transformative for anyone who entered. It stands as a terrifyingly sophisticated achievement from a people about whom we know almost nothing, a silent, stony reminder that the drive to understand death and seek what lies beyond it is a human constant, one that inspired our ancestors to move mountains, or in this case, to hollow them out with nothing but stone tools and an astonishingly advanced understanding of the human mind. Journeying now from the silent, sonic chambers of Malta to the sun-drenched hills of Greece, we arrive at a tomb that bridges the gap between epic poetry and hard archaeological fact. This is the so-called tomb of Agamemnon, more accurately known as the Treasury of Atreus, a monumental beehive-shaped tomb that stands as the most magnificent remnant of the Mycenaean civilization. Its very presence speaks of a world of warrior kings, legendary wealth, and a society that would provide the historical backdrop for Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. The structure itself is an awe-inspiring feat of Bronze Age engineering. Unlike the rock-cut hypogee or the hidden shafts of Egypt, this is a Tholos tomb, a massive, above-ground, circular burial chamber shaped like a beehive and entered through a long, walled passageway known as a dromos. The scale is simply staggering. The dromos leading to the tomb is over 120 feet long and walls 20 feet high, creating a processional way that builds a sense of immense anticipation. The doorway itself is a masterpiece of megalithic architecture, framed by monolithic jambs and crowned by a colossal lintel stone estimated to weigh over 120 tons. Above this lintel is the famous relieving triangle, a hollow space designed to divert the immense weight of the structure away from the door, which was later filled with ornate sculpted reliefs now lost to time. But it is the interior that truly takes one's breath away. Stepping through the great doorway, you enter a vast circular chamber soaring 43 feet into a perfect corbelled dome. For over 1,000 years, until the construction of the Pantheon in Rome, this was the widest unsupported dome in the world. Each ring of stone slightly overlaps the one below, carefully cut and positioned until the space closes at the top with a single capstone. The engineering precision required to achieve this stability, using only bronze tools, is almost beyond comprehension. The walls were originally adorned with hundreds of bronze rosettes, glittering in the light of a torch like a starry night sky, transforming the chamber from a mere tomb into a cosmic representation of the heavens for its royal occupant. This magnificent site, however, is forever linked to one of archaeology's most brilliant and controversial figures, Heinrich Schliemann, a self-made millionaire and a fervent believer in the historical truth of Homer's epics. Schliemann was an amateur who operated with a combination of incredible luck, stubborn determination, and a notorious disregard for scientific methodology. He had already claimed to have discovered Troy based on the Iliad, and in 1876 he turned his attention to the citadel of Mycenae, the legendary home of King Agamemnon, who led the Greek forces against Troy. Inside the citadel walls, Schliemann found a circle of royal graves known as Grave Circle A. It was here that he made a discovery that would electrify the world. He unearthed a series of shaft graves containing the remains of several individuals adorned with breathtaking funerary goods. The most famous find was a magnificent gold death mask, which Schliemann immediately telegrammed to the King of Greece, declaring, "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon." The mask, with its stern, bearded features and meticulous detail, seemed to be the perfect likeness of a Homeric hero king. The problem, of course, is that it almost certainly is not the face of Agamemnon. Modern archaeological dating has placed the masks and the shaft graves firmly in the 16th century BC, nearly 300 years before the traditional date of the Trojan War. Schliemann's dramatic claim was wrong, but his discovery was no less revolutionary. He had not found Agamemnon, but he had uncovered the tangible, golden reality of the civilization that inspired his legend. The treasures he pulled from the dirt were a window into a lost world of astonishing wealth and sophistication. The so-called Mask of Agamemnon was just one of several. The graves were filled with an incredible array of grave goods that redefined our understanding of the Mycenaeans. There were intricately inlaid bronze daggers depicting scenes of lion hunts with such fine detail they are considered masterpieces of miniature art. There were delicate golden cups, ornate jewelry, and countless sheets of gold foil that had once covered the bodies of the deceased, sewn onto their clothing or laid over their faces. This was not just wealth, it was a display of power, connection, and artistry. The presence of amber from the Baltic and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan proved the Mycenaeans were at the center of a vast international trade network. What these tombs reveal is a highly stratified, warlike, and wealthy society ruled by a powerful wanax or king who controlled a palace-based economy. The sheer volume of gold and weapons buried with these individuals suggests a culture where status was displayed through martial prowess and ostentatious consumption, even in death. They were the precursors to the classical Greeks, a powerful and sophisticated civilization that thrived for centuries before mysteriously collapsing around 1200 BC, plunging Greece into a dark age. The tomb of Agamemnon, therefore, stands not as the literal grave of a specific king, but as a powerful symbol of the very real and magnificent civilization that gave birth to his myth, a stone and gold testament to the fact that behind every great legend there often lies a kernel of breathtaking truth. Yet for all the silent, watchful presence of his terracotta legions, they represent merely the outer perimeter of a much grander and far more sinister design. The true heart of the first emperor's resting place, the central tomb mound itself, remains a sealed mystery, a treasure chest of potential horrors and wonders that modern archaeology dares not open. Ancient texts written by the grand historian Sima Qian just a century after the emperor's death provide a description so fantastical it has been dismissed as legend for generations. He wrote of an underground palace complex with ceilings inlaid with pearls to recreate the constellations of the night sky, and a vast map of the emperor's unified realm laid out upon the floor, featuring miniature versions of its great mountains and rivers. But the most astonishing detail, the one that fuels both fascination and fear, is his claim that these rivers, the Yangtze and the Yellow River, were not represented by stone or paint, but were ingeniously engineered to flow with shimmering liquid mercury. This account was long considered a fanciful metaphor or an allegory for the emperor's immense power, that is, until modern science entered the conversation. Beginning in the 1980s, Chinese archaeologists conducted a series of extensive soil surveys around the untouched tomb mound. Their findings were nothing short of astounding. The soil samples revealed mercury concentrations that were dramatically higher than those in the surrounding area, in some places up to 100 times the normal background level. The pattern of this mercury contamination was even more revealing. It wasn't a random, uniform spread. It appeared to trace a specific, distinct geographical layout across the site, mirroring the supposed course of the great rivers of China. This scientific evidence provides a startlingly plausible corroboration of Sima Qian's 2,000-year-old story, suggesting that the ancient chronicler was working from a very real and very terrifying source of information. The implications of this are as thrilling as they are daunting. The potential existence of these mercury rivers transforms the tomb from a mere burial chamber into a feat of dangerous and brilliant engineering. The mercury would have served a dual purpose, both symbolic and intensely practical. Symbolically, quicksilver was deeply associated with immortality in Taoist alchemy. It was believed to be a key component in elixirs of life. By sailing upon a mercury sea, the emperor would be fulfilling that ultimate alchemical fantasy in death. Practically, it would have acted as the most effective Chinese letter or anti-theft system ever conceived. Mercury emits toxic fumes that are odorless and lethal with prolonged exposure. Any ancient tomb robbers who managed to breach the outer layers of the tomb and puncture such a system would have been met with a poisonous, invisible gas that would have caused neurological damage, organ failure, and a certain agonizing death. The tomb was not just hidden, it was booby-trapped with an element that was as mystical as it was murderous. This presents the modern world with an unprecedented archaeological and ethical challenge. The desire to know what lies within is overwhelming. The central tomb could hold the answers to countless questions about the Qin dynasty, contain artistic treasures to rival Tutankhamun's, and perhaps even hold the emperor's remains themselves. But the known presence of massive quantities of mercury makes any attempt to excavate an incredibly hazardous endeavor. The risk to archaeologists would be immense, and the potential for environmental contamination is significant. Furthermore, the technology to safely excavate and preserve the organic artifacts that would undoubtedly be inside silks, wooden documents, lacquerware, and the emperor's body itself simply does not exist yet. To break the seal would be to destroy irreplaceable history. So the Chinese government has made the wise, if frustrating, decision to leave the tomb inviolate, a monument to patience and preservation. The terracotta warriors will continue their eternal watch, guarding not just the secrets of an emperor, but a profound lesson in humility, reminding us that some mysteries are so great and so fragile that they are best left to the future. From the sealed, mercury-laden tomb of a Chinese emperor, we now turn to a search for a grave defined not by what is inside, but by its utter absence from the map. This is the pursuit of a burial site that has eluded explorers, archaeologists, and conquerors for over 800 years, the final resting place of Genghis Khan. The man who forged the largest contiguous land empire in history, whose armies swept from the steppes of Mongolia to the gates of Vienna, was laid to rest in a location that was then systematically erased from memory by the most effective secret keepers in history, his own loyal followers. The mystery begins with the death of Genghis Khan himself in 1227, believed to have been the result of injuries sustained in a fall from his horse. According to the accounts of the time, his most trusted generals and family members were entrusted with the sacred duty of returning his body to his homeland. The funeral procession was a secretive and deadly affair. Any person unfortunate enough to cross its path was immediately killed to prevent them from revealing the route. Soldiers accompanying the body are said to have committed even more extreme acts to obscure their trail, including diverting an entire river to flow over the burial site, ensuring it would be buried under running water for all time. This extreme secrecy was born from the unique Mongol worldview and a very practical fear. The Mongols practiced a form of sky burial and earth burial, believing the body should return to nature without a trace. A grand tomb or lasting monument was not just unnecessary, it was a potential curse. They feared that a marked grave would not only desecrate the sacredness of the process, but would also become a target for their many enemies, who would surely seek to desecrate the remains of the great Khan. His spirit was what mattered, and it was to be honored at a shrine, not at a physical grave. The location of his body was a secret to be kept so well that even those who buried him would soon forget the exact spot, protected by the vast, featureless expanse of the Mongolian landscape. This has not stopped the relentless quest to find it. The search for Genghis Khan's tomb is often called the ultimate archaeological treasure hunt, a pursuit that has captivated everyone from Soviet-era expeditions to modern teams backed by cutting-edge technology. The challenges are immense. The suspected burial region in the Khentai province of Mongolia is a sprawling, remote wilderness of mountains, rivers, and dense forests, an area roughly the size of the state of Delaware. Furthermore, the site holds such profound cultural and religious significance for the Mongolian people that the government has long been hesitant to permit invasive excavations, fearing the disturbance of a national ancestor's eternal rest. Despite these obstacles, the hunt has produced its share of tantalizing clues and dramatic moments. In 2001, a joint American-Mongolian expedition claimed to have found the Khan's palace complex, which historical texts suggest would be located near his burial site. This discovery fueled hope that the tomb itself might be close. Perhaps the most famous modern effort was led by retired tech entrepreneur Maury Kravitz, who dedicated decades and a fortune to the search. His team focused on an area around a mountain called Burkhan Khaldun, which is mentioned in the secret history of the Mongols as a place of great importance to the young Temujin before he became Genghis Khan. Kravitz's expedition even resulted in a significant find, an ancient walled burial ground with over 60 graves. However, access was abruptly shut down by Mongolian authorities before the central tombs could be explored, a testament to the deep sensitivities surrounding the project. Today, the search continues with more respect and more sophisticated tools. Archaeologists are using non-invasive techniques like satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and drone surveys to scan promising areas without ever breaking ground. The goal is no longer just a trophy for a museum. It is a chance to understand the man behind the myth, to learn about the true origins of the Mongol Empire from the one site that has been untouched for centuries. Yet, many Mongolians harbor a quiet hope that the secret remains kept. They believe that the enduring mystery is itself the most fitting monument to Genghis Khan, a conqueror so powerful that even in death, he commands the obedience of his people and the awe of the world, his final resting place forever a part of the wild, untamed spirit of the land he loved. Moving from the windswept steppes of Mongolia, we find a tomb that tells a story not of a warrior king, but of profound love, tragic loss, and a grief so powerful it reshaped the religious landscape of the Roman Empire. This is the enigmatic and beautiful tomb, or more accurately, the temple tomb of Antinous, the beloved companion of the Emperor Hadrian. His story is a poignant and enduring mystery, a sudden, shocking death in the Nile that transformed a mortal youth into a god and left behind a burial site that continues to tantalize historians. Antinous was a young Greek from Bithynia in modern-day Turkey who caught the eye of the emperor, becoming his constant companion and beloved favorite on his extensive travels across the empire. In the year 130, during a journey up the Nile River in Egypt, the young man met a sudden and mysterious end. The official account, as related by the historian Cassius Dio, is starkly simple. Antinous plunged into the Nile. The circumstances surrounding his drowning, however, have been a subject of intense speculation for nearly 2 millennia. Was it a tragic accident, a case of voluntary sacrifice? Or something even darker? The ancient sources themselves are conflicted and layered with rumor. Some whispered of a simple boating accident. Others suggested a voluntary, ritualistic suicide, a theory that gained traction because the event occurred just before Hadrian was to undergo an astrologically significant ceremony that required a great personal sacrifice. The most sinister rumors, spread by Hadrian's political enemies, alleged that the emperor himself had ordered the youth's death for obscure reasons of court intrigue. The truth died with them in the muddy waters of the Nile, but the immediate aftermath is where the historical record becomes truly astonishing. Hadrian was utterly devastated. The emperor's reaction to this loss was unprecedented. He wept like a woman, in the words of one chronicler, and immediately embarked on a project of deification that would ensure his beloved's name would never be forgotten. He declared Antinous a god, establishing an official cult that spread across the empire with incredible speed. Cities were founded in his name, most notably Antinopolis near the site of his death in Egypt. Countless statues were commissioned, creating an idealized image of a beautiful, melancholic youth that became one of the most recognizable and reproduced portraits from the ancient world. Coins were struck bearing his likeness, and games were held in his honor. In a very short time, the cult of the deified Antinous became one of the most widespread and popular new religious movements in the Roman world. This divine status demanded a tomb worthy of a god. Hadrian, a renowned architect and builder, would have overseen the creation of a magnificent resting place. For centuries, the most compelling candidate has been a monumental structure on the outskirts of Rome, a sprawling, majestic tomb complex that we know today as the Castel Sant'Angelo. This was originally built as Hadrian's own mausoleum, a colossal cylindrical drum faced with marble and topped with a garden and a statue of the emperor driving a bronze chariot. The logic is seductive, a heartbroken emperor entombing his deified beloved within his own grand memorial so they could be together for eternity. It's a romantic and powerful idea, and for a long time it was accepted as fact. However, modern archaeology has cast serious doubt on this theory. Extensive studies of the mausoleum's interior have failed to identify any chamber or niche that could be definitively linked to Antinous. His name is conspicuously absent from the few surviving inscriptions. This has led scholars on a new quest, with many now believing that if Antinous was buried in Rome at all, it would have been in a separate, dedicated temple tomb. Another compelling theory places his final resting place not in Italy, but at the site of his apotheosis, his temple at Antinopolis in Egypt. Excavations there have revealed a large, impressive Greco-Roman city with a central temple, but the precise location of any tomb remains elusive, buried under centuries of silt and modern settlement. The enduring mystery of his tomb is a testament to the unique nature of his story. Unlike the tombs of emperors or generals, built to project power and legitimacy, the search for the tomb of Antinous is a search for a monument to pure, deifying grief. It represents a personal, emotional history that is often lost in the grand narratives of empires. The silence of the stones where he might lie is, in its own way, as powerful as any treasure-filled chamber. It forces us to look not for gold or artifacts, but for the echo of a love so profound it briefly made the entire Roman world worship a beautiful boy who drowned in the Nile. While the royal tombs of revealed a world of gold and grim sacrifice, one particular burial stood out for its unique and hauntingly beautiful treasure, offering a more intimate glimpse into Sumerian beliefs. This is the tomb of Queen Puabi, a woman of immense status whose name was found inscribed on a magnificent cylinder seal buried with her. But it wasn't the gold that made her grave uniquely enigmatic. It was a set of extraordinary artifacts that have come to be known as the Silver Hands of When Sir Leonard Woolley carefully excavated her chamber, he found the Queen's skeleton adorned with the usual spectacular jewelry. A golden headdress of beaded leaves, golden ribbons, and enormous golden earrings. But nestled near her remains were several objects that initially baffled the archaeologists. They were long, conical spirals made of shiny, electrum silver, each one meticulously crafted to resemble a human hand, complete with delicate, articulated fingers. These weren't mere decorative ornaments or symbols of wealth. Their design suggests a startlingly practical, yet deeply ritualistic purpose. The open, cupped shape of the hands with their slender silver fingers seems perfectly designed to hold something. The leading theory among archaeologists is that these silver hands were ceremonial implements, used by the queen or her priestess attendants during sacred rituals, perhaps to hold specific offerings like grains, sacred liquids, or even incense. They represent a level of sophistication and thoughtful design that goes far beyond simple display. They are tools for communion with the divine. Their presence in the tomb strongly implies that Queen Puabi was not just a political ruler but held a significant religious role, a high priestess who served as a crucial intermediary between her people and their gods. The craftsmanship itself is a marvel that speaks volumes about the advanced metallurgy of the Sumerians. Creating these objects required immense skill. The silversmiths had to expertly work the precious metal, shaping it into these delicate, lifelike forms without causing any fractures or imperfections. The fact that they have survived for over 4,500 years, retaining their form and detail, is a testament to the artistry of a civilization we often think of as ancient and primitive. They weren't just skilled, they were visionary artists working in a difficult medium, blending aesthetic beauty with ritual function in a way that feels both ancient and strangely modern. This discovery pushes us to reconsider the role of women in the highest echelons of early Mesopotamian power. Puabi was buried with a level of wealth and ceremony that rivaled any king. Her seal identified her by name without mentioning a husband, suggesting she may have ruled in her own right. The silver hands further cement this idea of autonomous, sacred authority. They suggest a world where a woman could wield not only political power but also profound religious influence, her very burial equipped with the tools she would need to continue her priestly duties in the afterlife. The Tomb of the Silver Hands, therefore, is more than a cache of beautiful artifacts. It is a silent but powerful argument for the presence of powerful, independent women at the very dawn of history, their authority etched in silver and buried in the sands of time. Yet for every grand, world-altering discovery in archaeology, there are those that remain fiercely debated, their truths fought over in academic journals and lecture halls rather than settled by a single definitive clue. Such is the case with one of the most electrifying finds of the 20th century, a discovery that promised to finally put a face and a name to one of history's most influential and often overlooked figures, the tomb believed to belong to Philip II of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great. The story begins in the late 1970s when the Greek archaeologist Manolis Andronikos turned his attention to a large, earthen mound known as the Great Tumulus in the small town of Vergina in northern Greece. For years, this was considered just another prominent hill in the landscape, but Andronikos, driven by a conviction that ancient Agai, the ancestral capital of the Macedonian kings, was located nearby, began to dig. What he uncovered beneath that mound would send shockwaves through the world of classical archaeology. His team unearthed a cluster of undisturbed royal tombs, their contents breathtakingly intact despite the passage of over 2 millennia. But one burial, designated Tomb 2, stood out from all the rest. It was a large, vaulted structure that had miraculously escaped the notice of looters. When Andronikos and his team managed to open the sealed marble doors, they were met with a scene of unimaginable splendor. The main chamber contained a magnificent gold larnax or ossuary, its lid adorned with a stunning, intricate star-burst, the emblem of the Macedonian royal family. Inside this heavy gold casket were the cremated bones of a man, carefully wrapped in a magnificent purple and gold cloth. Beside the larnax was a stunning golden oak wreath, its leaves and acorns crafted with such delicate precision that they seemed to shimmer with a life of their own. The antechamber held another, smaller gold larnax containing the remains of a woman, also accompanied by a beautiful golden diadem. The sheer quality and regal nature of the finds immediately suggested this was no ordinary noble. Alongside the human remains was a veritable arsenal of the highest quality. There was a complete set of ceremonial armor, including a bronze muscle cuirass, a helmet, and a magnificent shield. Most tellingly, there was an iron sword still in its scabbard, and perhaps the most iconic artifact of all, a small, delicate ivory portrait head of a man, his features rendered with startling realism. The man depicted is bearded with a determined, authoritative expression, and most crucially, he has a very distinct injury to his right eye with the lid partially closed. To Andronikos, the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with irresistible force. The historical records were clear. Philip II of Macedon, the brilliant and ruthless king who unified Greece and forged the army his son would use to conquer the known world, had been struck in the eye by an arrow during a siege, an injury that left him disfigured. The ivory portrait showed a man with exactly such a wound. Here was a warrior king, buried with his weapons and his crown in the ancient capital of his kingdom. Andronikos made his famous announcement to the world. He had found the lost tomb of Alexander the Great's father. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The star burst on the larnax was a known royal symbol. The date of the tomb, based on the pottery and style of the artifacts, placed it squarely in the second half of the 4th century BC, the exact time of Philip's assassination in 336 BC. The presence of the youthful female burial in the antechamber was quickly linked to Cleopatra, Philip's last wife, who was murdered shortly after his death. The magnificent armor, the gilded weapons, the sheer opulence of the gold, it all pointed to a king of immense power and wealth, and no one fit that description in Macedon better than Philip. The discovery was celebrated as a national triumph for Greece, and the treasures were enshrined in a magnificent museum built inside the tumulus itself, allowing visitors to stand in the very presence of history. However, in the decades since that electrifying announcement, a vigorous scholarly debate has emerged challenging Andronikos's confident assertion. A significant faction of archaeologists and historians now argues that the evidence points not to Philip II, but to his son, Philip III Ahidius, who was the half-brother and a much less successful successor of Alexander the Great. The counter-argument rests on several key points. First, the style of the pottery and some of the metalwork found within the tomb appears to be slightly later than the date of Philip II's death, perhaps by 20 years or so, which would align perfectly with the death of Philip Ahidius in 317 BC. Secondly, the practice of cremation. Philip II was assassinated during a grand public festival and given a lavish, traditional pyre burial. His son, Alexander, was embalmed in the Egyptian fashion. Philip Ahidius, however, was murdered in a coup and may well have been cremated in a more hurried, though still royal, manner. The most compelling evidence for the Philip Ahidius theory, however, comes from the artifacts themselves, specifically the armor. The magnificent shield found in the tomb shows clear signs of having been used in battle, with repairs and battle damage visible. Proponents of the Philip Ahidius theory point out that Philip II, at the time of his death, was a seasoned commander in his mid-40s who had been wounded numerous times. The skeletal remains inside the larnax, however, show no signs of the severe trauma one would expect from such a life. There are no old, healed wounds on the bones. The injury to the eye socket, while dramatic, could have been caused post-mortem during the cremation process, as the intense heat can cause bones to warp and fracture in ways that mimic injury. Furthermore, the face of the ivory portrait, while bearing an eye injury, does not perfectly match other known depictions of Philip II on coins, which show a much more rugged, harshly featured man. The debate remains one of the most fascinating in archaeology because it is about more than just identifying a set of bones. It is about the legacy of a dynasty. If the tomb belongs to Philip II, then we are looking upon the actual remains of the man who created the modern concept of Western warfare, the diplomatic genius who transformed a backward kingdom into a superpower. We are in the presence of Alexander's father, the source of his ambition and his military brilliance. If, however, the tomb belongs to Philip Ahidius, a king who was widely considered a feeble-minded puppet ruler, then the magnificent armor and the golden wreath become symbols of a very different story, one of a diluted legacy where the trappings of power were inherited by a man who could not hope to fill them. The truth remains locked within the bones and the beautiful, silent artifacts, a riddle from the past that continues to challenge our certainty and remind us that even the most sensational discoveries are often just the beginning of the conversation, not its end. Shifting our focus from the golden chambers of kings to the murky depths of a prehistoric lake, we encounter a burial practice so starkly different it feels like it belongs to another world entirely. In the quiet of Motala, Sweden, archaeologists excavating the dried-up bed of what was once Lake Vättern made a discovery that was less about treasure and more about profound, and perhaps terrifying, ritual. This is the Tomb of the Sunken Skulls, a Mesolithic site dating back 8,000 years that challenges everything we thought we knew about how these early hunter-gatherers viewed death and the afterlife. Unlike the later grand tombs we've explored, this was not a resting place for a single elite individual. Instead, it was a communal deposit of the dead placed intentionally at the bottom of a lake. The remains of at least 11 individuals were found, but it was the condition of the skulls that sent a chill through the research team. Several of the craniums showed unmistakable, gruesome evidence of trauma. One skull had a large piece of another human skull wedged inside it. Another had a wooden stake driven straight through its brain case from the base to the crown. Yet another showed signs of having been mounted on a stake, likely displayed before its final deposition in the water. This was not a simple burial, it was a complex and violent ceremonial site. Interpreting these actions through a modern lens is a difficult and delicate task. The immediate, visceral reaction is to see this as evidence of warfare, execution, or cannibalism, a snapshot of a brutally violent society. However, archaeology urges us to look beyond our initial assumptions. The absence of defensive wounds on the post-cranial skeletons suggests these individuals were not killed in a fight. The careful, ritualistic placement of the remains points toward a practice that was symbolic, not senseless. This leads many experts to believe we are witnessing an intricate form of funerary ritual, one that may have been intended to honor the dead and protect the living. In many prehistoric cultures, the skull was believed to house the spirit or life force of an individual. The practice of manipulating skulls after death, known as skull cults, is found in various forms across the globe. The act of mounting a skull on a stake and submerging it in water could have been a way to tether a powerful spirit to a specific, sacred place, preventing it from wandering and causing harm. Alternatively, it might have been a method of venerating ancestors, ensuring their wisdom and protection continued to flow into the community like the waters of the lake itself. The water was not a dumping ground, it was a sacred conduit to the spirit world, a threshold between the realm of the living and the dead. This discovery forces a dramatic re-evaluation of the Mesolithic people of Scandinavia. They are often portrayed as simple nomads concerned only with survival. The sunken skulls reveal a society with a rich and complex spiritual life, capable of abstract thought about the nature of death and the soul. They had ritual specialists who understood anatomy well enough to perform these precise modifications to human bone. Theirs was a worldview where the boundaries between respect and fear, between honoring an ancestor and pacifying a spirit, were deeply intertwined. The quiet lake in Motala was not just a source of water and food. It was a cathedral of the deep, where the mysteries of life and death were addressed with a stark, powerful, and unforgettable physicality. But the quest for immortality often leaves a trail of tragedy in its wake. And for all the grandeur of the first emperor's planned eternity, the immediate aftermath of his death was a bloody and brutal affair. Just a short distance from his silent, unopened tomb mound and the ranks of his Terracotta Army, archaeologists made a discovery that casts a long, dark shadow over the Qin dynasty's final days. This is not a pit of clay soldiers, but a mass grave containing the bones of the emperor's own children, a haunting testament to the vicious power struggle that erupted the moment he was gone. The story of this grim discovery begins with the emperor's final journey in 210 BC. He died while on a tour of the eastern reaches of his empire. His prime minister, Lai Si, and the chief eunuch, Zhao Gao, desperately conspired to conceal his death to prevent widespread panic and a succession crisis during the long return to the capital. They went so far as to place the emperor's body in his carriage alongside carts of rotting fish to mask the smell of decay. This desperate act of secrecy set the stage for an explosive and deadly confrontation over who would wield power next. The emperor had over 20 sons and daughters, and his chosen successor was his eldest son, Fusu. However, Fusu was away from the court, serving on the frontier with the general Meng Tian. Seeing an opportunity, Lai Si and Zhao Gao forged a letter from the dead emperor, ordering both Fusu and General Meng Tian to commit suicide. Tragically, they complied, removing the most legitimate and militarily powerful claimant to the throne. They then placed a younger, more pliable son, Hu Hai, on the throne as Emperor Qin Ershi, with Zhao Gao effectively pulling the strings as the power behind it. But securing the throne required more than just installing a puppet emperor. It demanded the elimination of any potential rival. What followed was a systematic and horrifying purge of the imperial family. The historical records written by the Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian describe a gruesome scene. Zhao Gao convinced the new, young emperor that his siblings were plotting against him and that to secure his rule they had all to be executed. The princes and princesses were summoned to the capital under false pretenses. The princes were then forced to take their own lives, while the princesses were torn apart by chariots in the marketplace, a particularly brutal and public form of execution designed to terrorize any potential opposition. For centuries, these accounts were viewed as perhaps exaggerated tales from a historian writing for the dynasty that had overthrown the Qin. That is, until the 1970s, when archaeologists working near the first emperor's mausoleum complex made a horrifying find. They uncovered a cluster of burial pits, but these did not contain terracotta. Instead, they held human remains. One pit, in particular, was filled with the disarticulated skeletons of 7 young adults, their bodies thrown in with a chaotic disregard for dignity. In another, the remains of 2 princes were found still inside their ornate bronze coffins, a sign of their high status even in death. But the most poignant discovery was made in a third pit, which held the skeleton of a young man who had been decapitated, his head placed carefully beside his body. The artifacts buried with them high-quality silks, gold and silver ornaments, and exquisite jade pieces confirmed their royal status. These were no commoners, they were the sons and daughters of Qin Shi Huang. The forensic evidence on the bones tells a story of extreme violence that matches the ancient texts. Many of the skeletons show clear signs of a violent death, slash marks from bladed weapons, crushed skulls, and severed limbs. The body of the decapitated prince shows the precise cut marks on his vertebrae from a very sharp blade, likely a sword wielded with executioner's force. These are not the remains of people who died in battle or from illness. They are the victims of a deliberate, orchestrated massacre. This discovery transforms our understanding of the Qin dynasty's collapse from a historical event into a deeply human tragedy. The Terracotta Army was built to protect the emperor in the next life, but it stood utterly powerless to protect his own flesh and blood in this one. The pits containing his children's bodies are a stark counterpoint to the orderly ranks of the terracotta warriors. One represents the idealized, controlled military power of an empire. The other represents the chaotic, brutal reality of raw political ambition. It reveals that the greatest threat to the emperor's legacy did not come from foreign invaders or rebellious peasants, but from the very courtiers he trusted to preserve it. The silence that now hangs over these graves is a heavier monument than any stone statue, a solemn reminder that the pursuit of absolute power often demands the most absolute and heartbreaking of sacrifices. For centuries, the arid coastal plains of northern Peru held a secret that would redefine our understanding of pre-Inca civilizations, a secret not buried beneath a grand pyramid, but hidden within a modest-looking adobe platform known as Huaca Rajada. The story of its discovery in 1987 reads like a Hollywood thriller, beginning not with archaeologists but with local police. They had been alerted to prolific looting at the site, and upon investigating, they found that the looters had already breached a royal tomb, making off with magnificent artifacts of gold and silver. But in their haste and greed, they had missed the main event. Alerted to the police operation, archaeologist Walter Alva was granted permission to excavate, and what he and his team unearthed just a few feet from the ransacked chamber was nothing short of miraculous. The completely intact tomb of a Moch ruler, a man who would come to be known as the Lord of Sipan. The comparison to Tutankhamun is inevitable and for once entirely justified. Like Carter's discovery in Egypt, this was a time capsule, a sovereign's burial frozen in time for 1700 years with its staggering wealth of grave goods untouched. But where Tutankhamun's tomb felt rushed and repurposed, the tomb of the Lord of Supon was a meticulously orchestrated masterpiece of funerary art. The Lord himself was laid to rest at the center of a nested series of coffins, the innermost being a wooden sarcophagus, a funerary practice previously unknown in the ancient Americas. He was adorned from head to toe in the emblems of his immense power. On his head rested a magnificent golden helmet, and covering his face was a nose ornament of solid gold, so large and elaborate it would have stretched from his cheek to cheek. His chest was covered with a protective pectoral made of tiny gold beads numbering in the thousands, and his hands held scepters of solid gold and silver. He wore intricate ear spools and was surrounded by dozens of ceramic vessels, each one a masterpiece of Moche portrait art. Yet the true measure of his importance was revealed by the companions who accompanied him into the afterlife. In the chamber directly above him was the body of a military commander, still wearing his ceremonial helmet and shield. Flanking the Lord on one side was a priest, and on the other a young boy, likely a symbolic guardian. Just outside the main burial chamber were the remains of 3 young women, possibly wives or concubines, and a separate guard holding the leash of a dog. In an adjacent pit, the skeleton of a second man was found, missing his feet, a grim detail that suggests they may have been amputated to prevent him from abandoning his post as the Lord's eternal sentinel. This was not the random sacrifice seen at Ur. This was a carefully selected court, each member playing a specific role to ensure the ruler's divine status and authority continued uninterrupted in the next world. The artifacts themselves are a breathtaking testament to the Moche's extraordinary metallurgical and artistic skills. These were not a people who simply hammered gold into simple ornaments. Their techniques were incredibly advanced, involving complex soldering, alloying, and sophisticated gilding. They created objects of terrifying beauty, like a necklace made of solid gold peanuts, each pod perfectly rendered, symbolizing the source of life and sustenance. They crafted intricate ear spools depicting the Lord as a warrior priest, capturing his likeness with a realism that rivals Roman portraiture. But perhaps the most telling artifacts were the ceremonial decapitators, large, crescent-shaped knives of gold and silver. These were not merely weapons, they were instruments of ritual directly linked to the Moche's elaborate religious practices, which often involved ceremonial combat and the offering of blood to appease the gods. This single tomb provided the Rosetta Stone for understanding Moche civilization. Before its discovery, the Moche were known primarily for their hyper-realistic pottery depicting everything from daily life to graphic scenes of warfare and sacrifice. Scholars debated whether these scenes were mythology, allegory, or historical record. The Lord of Supon proved they were real. Every detail of his burial, his regalia, his attendants, his weapons correlated perfectly with the iconography found on the ceramics. He was the living, breathing embodiment of the warrior priest depicted so often in Moche art. His tomb revealed a society with a rigid hierarchy, a powerful warrior class, a complex and vivid religious belief system, and a level of artistic sophistication that was unparalleled in the ancient New World. He was not just a king, he was a semi-divine figure, an intermediary between his people and the fearsome deities of the Andes, and his magnificent burial gives us a names, a face, and a stunning material culture to one of history's most fascinating and powerful lost civilizations. But our journey now takes a far more intimate turn, away from the courts of emperors and kings to a much earlier, more foundational moment in human history. We travel back 12,000 years to a time when humanity was on the cusp of a revolution, the transition from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled village life. In a cave on the slopes of Mount Carmel in Israel, archaeologists made a discovery within the Halicarnassus cave that would shatter long-held assumptions about the origins of religious power and the role of women in prehistoric societies. This is the tomb of the shaman, the final resting place of a woman whose burial suggests she was far more than just a member of her community. she was a bridge to the spirit world. The remains themselves tell a story of a meticulously orchestrated and deeply symbolic send-off. The woman, who was around 45 years old and living with a significant physical disability, was not laid out flat like a typical burial. Instead, she was placed in a most unusual position, curled on her side within a specially constructed oval-shaped shell lined hollow in the cave floor. Her spine was severely deformed, and one of her legs was shorter than the other, meaning she would have walked with a pronounced limp and likely lived with chronic pain. In a society of hunter-gatherers where physical prowess was paramount, her survival to middle age is the first clue that she was valued for something beyond her physical contribution. The contents of her grave, however, are what truly set it apart from any other burial from this period. Arranged around and on top of her body was a stunning collection of grave goods, but these were not simple stone tools or everyday items. They were the parts of animals carefully selected for their symbolic power. The list reads like a ritual recipe: a complete human foot, 50 tortoise shells, the pelvis of a leopard, the wing of a golden eagle, the skull of a stone marten, the tail of an aurochs, and the severed tip of a wild boar's tail. This was not a random collection of trophies. Each element was chosen with clear intent. The tortoises, for instance, are slow, ancient creatures often associated with longevity and the earth in later mythologies. The leopard and eagle are apex predators, symbols of strength and a connection to the celestial realm. This was a toolkit for the afterlife, or perhaps a set of ritual props that had been her companions in life, now buried with her. The sheer effort involved in procuring these items is a testament to her importance. Gathering 50 tortoises, butchering a massive aurochs for just its tail, and hunting a leopard for its pelvis would have required a coordinated, community-wide effort over a significant period. This was not a hasty burial. It was a planned, labor-intensive event that honored her passing in a way that was entirely unique for her time. The care taken suggests that her community believed her power or her connection to the spirit world did not end with her death, but needed to be properly managed and perhaps even sent on its way with the correct ceremonial accessories. This discovery forces a dramatic rethinking of the Natufian culture and the very origins of shamanism. For a long time, the narrative of early religious leadership was implicitly male, often centered around the image of a shaman as a male hunter communicating with the spirits of the game. The Halicarnassus burial provides compelling evidence that some of the earliest known ritual specialists were women, and that their authority was derived not from physical strength, but from spiritual knowledge, healing abilities, or a unique relationship with the natural world. Her physical disability may have even been the source of her power, marking her as different, touched by the spirits, and therefore able to mediate between the community and the unseen forces that governed their lives. She was likely a healer, a storyteller, a keeper of rituals, and an interpreter of dreams, a pivotal figure in a community navigating the terrifying and exciting new world of settled life. Her grave is a quiet, powerful monument to the human mind's capacity for belief, and a reminder that the search for meaning and connection beyond the physical world is a thread that runs back to the very dawn of our history. Yet for all the ancient mysteries buried in the sands of Egypt or the hills of Greece, some of the most startling discoveries are made not in distant deserts, but in the very heart of modern Europe, often by complete accident. Such was the case in the quiet French region of Burgundy, where in 1953 a farmer named René Gragnon decided to uproot an old hazel tree on his land near the village of Vix. As his plow bit into the earth, it struck something solid and unyielding. Expecting a stubborn boulder, he and his companions began to dig, only to uncover the curved lip of a gigantic, intricately decorated bronze vessel. They had no idea they were standing directly above the final resting place of a figure who would become known as the Celtic Prince of Vix, a discovery that would shatter long-held beliefs about the so-called barbarian tribes of prehistoric Europe. What emerged from that simple field was not a simple chieftain's grave, but a burial of staggering opulence and international connection. The centerpiece was and remains the magnificent artifact that first caught the plow, the Vix crater. This was not a locally made pot. It was a colossal bronze wine-mixing vessel of Greek manufacture, standing over 5 feet tall and weighing an astonishing 450 pounds. Its sheer size is enough to boggle the mind. It is the largest metal vessel from all of classical antiquity to survive intact, but its beauty is what truly captivates. The crater is adorned with intricate cast and hammered decorations. A frieze of hoplite soldiers and chariots encircles its neck, and its handles are crafted in the form of the fearsome Gorgons, their faces frozen in a protective snarl. The craftsmanship is flawless, a masterpiece of Greek metallurgy that had somehow traveled hundreds of miles from a workshop in a Greek colony, likely in southern Italy, all the way to the interior of France. But the crater was merely the most spectacular item in a collection that spoke of immense wealth and far-flung connections. The deceased, a woman who was around 35 years old, was laid upon the chassis of a ceremonial chariot, its wheels carefully arranged beside her. She was adorned with exquisite jewelry that marked her incredibly high status. Around her neck was a torque, the classic Celtic neck ring, but this was no ordinary piece. It was made of pure, solid gold, weighing nearly a pound, and its terminals were decorated with tiny, perfectly sculpted winged horses, a motif straight out of Greek mythology. On her wrists were bronze and lignite bracelets, and she wore anklets of the same materials. The grave also contained fine black figure Greek pottery, an Etruscan bronze jug, and a stunning collection of amber beads, hinting at trade routes that stretched from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean. This single burial forces a complete re-evaluation of the early Celts, or the Hallstatt culture as they are known from this period. They were not the isolated, warring savages often depicted by later Roman historians. The Princess of Vix, as she is often called, reveals a society with a highly stratified, complex aristocracy that engaged in long-distance trade on an industrial scale. So how did a Greek crater end up in a French field? The answer lies in the ancient economics of desire. The Celtic elites of interior Europe controlled access to desperately sought-after raw materials, salt from the Austrian Alps, tin from Cornwall, and amber from the Baltic. The Mediterranean world, particularly the Greek colonists in places like Massalia, modern-day Marseille, craved these goods. In return, they offered the ultimate status symbols of the ancient world, wine and the magnificent vessels required to serve it in the proper, civilized Greek style. The Vix crater was not just a piece of art, it was the centerpiece of a new, elite social ritual. The princess and her court would have used it to mix wine with water and serve it to their most important guests, a performance of power that demonstrated their command over not just local resources, but a vast international network of prestige and influence. The tomb itself suggests a society in a fascinating state of cultural flux. Here was a woman buried with the quintessential symbol of Celtic power, the chariot yet adorned with the finest luxury goods the classical world could produce. She was a local ruler whose authority was legitimized by her access to global, literally Mediterranean, treasures. Her grave is a powerful argument against the old dichotomy of civilized versus barbarian. It shows us a world where a Celtic chieftainess could sit in her hill fort, drinking fine Greek wine from an Etruscan cup, wearing gold worked in a local style inspired by foreign myths, all because her control of the salt trade gave her a bargaining chip that made her a key player in a continental economic system. She was not on the periphery, she was at the very center of a web that connected the entire European continent, a testament to the fact that even in the deepest recesses of prehistory, no culture ever truly existed in isolation. While the treasures of Vix spoke of a Celtic chieftainess connected to the wider world through trade, our next enigmatic tomb reveals a civilization looking inward, toward a spiritual realm where immortality was not just a desire but a tangible pursuit crafted from stone. We journey now to the heart of ancient China, to a tomb that stands as a monument to one of the most profound and enduring beliefs in Chinese culture, the power of jade. This is not the grand, unopened mound of the first emperor, but a slightly later burial from the Han Dynasty, a resting place so saturated with the green stone that it has earned the evocative nickname, the Tomb of the Jade Emperor. The discovery of this tomb offered archaeologists a breathtaking glimpse into the Han elite's obsession with the afterlife. The body of the nobleman, likely a high-ranking prince or an incredibly wealthy aristocrat, was not simply adorned with jade jewelry, it was encased in it. He was found wearing a complete jade burial suit, an astonishing funerary garment constructed from thousands of small, finely polished jade plaques. Each individual plaque was painstakingly drilled with tiny holes at the corners and then meticulously laced together with threads of gold, silver, or silk, depending on the rank of the deceased, to form a second skin of stone that covered the body from head to toe. The suit itself is a marvel of lapidary art and a testament to the immense value placed on this material. But the suit was merely the centerpiece. The tomb was filled with hundreds of additional jade artifacts, discs, Kong tubes, carved ornaments in the shapes of dragons and phoenixes, and jade plugs designed to seal every orifice of the body. To understand why this tomb is so significant, one must first appreciate the unique role jade played in the Chinese worldview. For over 8,000 years, jade was considered more precious than gold or silver. It was not merely a decorative stone, it was the physical embodiment of the most cherished virtues of purity, moral integrity, grace, and benevolence. Its smooth, cool touch and its remarkable toughness, it is incredibly difficult to break, made it a symbol of unyielding strength and permanence. Confucius himself praised jade, comparing its qualities to those of a superior man, noting its gentle glow represented kindness and its compactness and strength represented wisdom. It was the ultimate symbol of earthly perfection. However, the contents of this particular tomb point toward a purpose that goes beyond Confucian ideals of virtue and into the mystical realm of early Taoist alchemy. Taoism, which was crystallizing as a formal religious and philosophical system during the Han Dynasty, placed a tremendous emphasis on achieving physical immortality. Its adepts believed that the body could be preserved and transformed into an eternal, transcendent form through esoteric practices, special diets, and the use of specific materials believed to possess vital energy or Kai. Jade was considered the ultimate material for this purpose. Alchemical texts from the period describe it as a potent substance that could ward off evil spirits and prevent the physical corruption of the flesh. The belief was that if the body could be protected from decay, the spirit would have a permanent home, allowing the individual to achieve immortality. The Jade Emperor's tomb is a direct physical manifestation of these beliefs. Every single artifact serves this singular, profound goal. The jade suit was not a status symbol, it was a spiritual incubator, a magical shell designed to hermetically seal the body and protect it from the forces of decomposition. The plugs for the ears, nose, and mouth were intended to prevent the soul from escaping and evil influences from entering. The discs with their circular shape representing heaven, and the Kong tubes with their square outer form representing earth, were ritual objects placed around the body to harmonize the tomb with the cosmos and facilitate the deceased's journey into the eternal realm. This was not a hopeful gesture, it was a sophisticated technological and ritualistic operation conducted in stone, a final, desperate attempt to cheat death using the most powerful substance known to ancient Chinese thought. The tomb stands as a breathtakingly literal and expensive monument to humanity's oldest and most compelling desire, the hope that life does not have to end. Now we travel from the carefully curated tombs of emperors to a burial ground born from the chaos of battle, a site that may hold the key to unlocking one of the Bronze Age's most baffling puzzles. On the sun-scorched coast of modern-day Israel, near the ancient Canaanite city of Lachish, archaeologists uncovered a mass grave that was anything but ordinary. Dating to around the 12th century BC, a time of unprecedented upheaval and collapse, this pit contained the remains of at least 150 individuals, their bodies unceremoniously heaped together. But it wasn't the grim nature of the burial that sent a shockwave through the academic world. It was the tantalizing possibility that these bones might belong to the most enigmatic invaders in ancient history, the legendary Sea Peoples. The historical record of these mysterious marauders comes primarily from the walls of Egyptian temples. Pharaoh Ramesses III, in his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, left a stunning visual and written account of a desperate battle for survival. He describes a shadowy coalition of foreign tribes he simply calls the Sea Peoples, who had already toppled great empires like the Hittites and laid waste to coastal cities from Anatolia to Syria. Their names are as cryptic as their origins: the Peliset, the Jekka, the Shekelesh, the Denyon, and the Weshesh. With their families loaded into ox carts on a massive maritime invasion, they descended upon Egypt itself, aiming to carve out a new homeland from the richest kingdom on the Nile. Ramesses claims a great victory, repelling the invasion and settling captured prisoners of war within Egypt's borders. But after this, the Sea Peoples vanish from history, leaving behind a colossal mystery. Who were they, and where did they come from? The mass grave at Lachish presents a compelling and controversial piece of this puzzle. The first clue lies in the pottery found alongside the skeletons. Scattered amongst the bones were shards of a very distinct type of pottery not native to Canaan. This was Aegean-style pottery, of a kind made by the Mycenaean Greeks, but it wasn't imported. It was locally made, suggesting the people who used it had been living in the region long enough to establish their own potters' workshops. This immediately set the individuals in the grave apart from the local Canaanite population. Then came the analysis of the bones themselves, which revealed a story written in the skeletons. A significant number of the individuals showed signs of healed battle trauma, old wounds that had knit back together, proving they were seasoned, professional warriors long before they met their end at Lachish. Furthermore, studies of the skulls revealed something even more telling. Many of them had a distinct cranial structure, with a notable elongation that was common among populations from the Aegean and Anatolian regions, but entirely foreign to the Levant. The most haunting evidence, however, was the manner of their death and burial. These were not victims of a simple skirmish. The skeletons bear the horrific marks of a brutal, close-quarters battle. Many have fatal wounds from heavy, sharp weapons that cleaved through bone. Some skulls were crushed by blunt force trauma. They were not given individual graves or any form of respectful ceremony. They were dumped, their bodies tangled together in a pit, some with arrows still embedded in their bones. This suggests they died not as defenders of the city, but as attackers who were killed en masse by the city's defenders and then disposed of as a threat even in death. The timeline fits perfectly with the wider collapse. Lachish was destroyed and burned around 1150 BC, right in the middle of the cataclysmic period when the Sea Peoples were rampaging through the region. If these are indeed the remains of a Sea Peoples warband, the implications are profound. It would provide the first ever concrete, physical evidence of these shadowy invaders, giving us a faces and a genetic profile for a group that has been little more than a name and a relief on a temple wall for 3,000 years. It would suggest that at least one faction, likely the Peliset who are later identified with the Philistines, was pushing south along the coast of Canaan, attempting to conquer Egyptian-controlled territories, and that they met fierce, successful resistance from the local Canaanite forces. This would rewrite our understanding of the end of the Bronze Age, showing it wasn't just a simple story of mysterious invaders toppling decadent empires, but a complex, chaotic free-for-all where local forces could and did fight back effectively. Of course, the identification remains a hotly debated topic. skeptics argue that the evidence, while compelling, is not definitive. The pottery could indicate trade or the presence of a small community of Aegean migrants, not necessarily invaders. The cranial features, while suggestive, are not a perfect proxy for ethnicity. The battle could have been against any group of well-armed foreigners or even a rival Canaanite city-state. The true, definitive proof would lie in ancient DNA analysis, a challenging prospect given the degradation of genetic material in such a warm climate. Until then, the mass grave at Lachish remains a powerful and haunting candidate, a silent battlefield where the bones of the fallen may finally be giving up the secrets of history's most mysterious maritime threat. Yet, even as we ponder the fate of entire civilizations lost to time, history reminds us that the rituals surrounding death could be just as elaborate and peculiar among those whose stories are extensively documented. In the heart of Paris, beneath the quiet gloom of a church now known as Saint Eustache, lies one of the most unusual and macabre relics of European monarchy, the separately entombed heart of Louis XIV, the famed Sun King. This practice, which seems so bizarre to modern sensibilities, was not an isolated oddity but a profound expression of Baroque-era belief, power, and a very specific French royal tradition known as dilaceratio corporis, the division of the body. When Louis XIV drew his last breath at Versailles in September of 1715, after a record-breaking reign of 72 years, the machinery of royal funeral rites swung into action with a precision that mirrored the absolute order he had imposed upon his court. His death set in motion a complex three-part burial process. His body was embalmed, a procedure that involved removing his organs to prevent rapid decay. His entrails were quickly and quietly buried in the Notre Dame cemetery at Versailles. His body itself was transported to the royal necropolis at the Basilica of Saint Denis, where it was interred in a magnificent tomb. But his heart was given a separate grand journey. Placed in a special heart-shaped casket made of solid silver, it was carried in its own solemn procession to the Church of the Jesuits in Paris, a place now replaced by Saint Eustache, where it was entombed with full ceremony. This division was deeply symbolic, representing the king's threefold sovereignty. His body belonged to the state and the nation, hence its burial at Saint Denis alongside his predecessors. His heart, long considered the seat of the soul, emotion, and love, was offered to the capital city of Paris and its people, a gesture of the monarch's enduring affection for his subjects. And his entrails, the most base and mortal part, were disposed of with little fanfare near the site of his death. This was more than just practical embalming, it was a political and theological statement. In an age of absolute monarchy, even in death the king's physical form was partitioned to reflect the different facets of his divine right to rule, ensuring his symbolic presence was felt in multiple sacred spaces across his domain. The Sun King's heart was far from the only one to receive this honor. The practice was a hallmark of French royal and noble funerals for centuries. The heart of Anne of Brittany, the beloved twice-crowned Queen of France, was famously placed in an exquisite gold enameled reliquary to be carried to her chosen place of burial. The heart of Louis XVII, the tragic boy who died in prison during the Revolution, was miraculously preserved by the physician who performed his autopsy. It spent centuries in private hands before undergoing extensive DNA testing and finally being laid to rest in the royal crypt at Saint Denis in 2004, a poignant and belated end to a royal tragedy. These hearts were not hidden away but enshrined, often in lavish containers that were themselves masterpieces of goldsmithing and enameling, becoming objects of veneration and political symbolism. The ultimate fate of these royal relics, however, was as dramatic as their interment. The French Revolution sought to erase every symbol of the ancient regime, and this fervor extended to the dead. In 1793, revolutionary zealots stormed the Basilica of Saint Denis, desecrating the royal tombs and throwing the remains of kings and queens into a mass lime pit. The heart of Louis XIV, along with many others housed in the Jesuit church, was lost during this chaotic period, likely melted down for its precious metal. The empty heart shrine at St. Eustache now stands as a silent memorial to this vanished tradition. The practice of dilaceratio corporis offers a fascinating, if grisly, window into the Baroque mind, a world where the mortal remains of a king were not merely a body to be buried, but a powerful political and religious currency to be strategically distributed, ensuring the light of the Sun King in all its parts would forever shine upon France. Moving from the grand, orchestrated funerals of French kings to a much older and more enigmatic burial, we find ourselves on the windswept Dingle Peninsula in County Kerry, Ireland. Here, in the shadow of an ancient ring fort, a discovery was made that seems to step right out of local myth and into the archaeological record. This is the story of the tomb of the unknown giant, a Bronze Age burial that has fueled debate and wonder in equal measure since its uncovering. The discovery took place in the early 20th century during the excavation of a stone-lined cist grave, a type of burial common in the region during the Bronze Age. Such graves typically hold the crouched remains of a single individual alongside a few simple grave goods. This particular cist, however, contained something that made the excavators pause. The skeleton within was, by any standard of the era, colossal. When measured, the bones indicated an individual who stood well over 7 feet tall in an age when the average height was significantly shorter. This was not just a tall person, this was a veritable giant by the standards of 2,500 years ago. Alongside the skeleton were the characteristic artifacts of the period, a bronze dagger and a collection of funerary pottery, firmly placing the burial in the Irish Bronze Age and ruling out any notion of a more recent interment. The immediate and most tantalizing theory connects this find directly to the rich tapestry of Irish folklore, which is saturated with stories of a mythical race of giants known as the Fomorians. These were not the friendly giants of some fairy tales. In Irish mythology, the Fomorians are often depicted as a race of monstrous, misshapen beings who occupied Ireland before the coming of the Gaels, representing the chaotic and destructive forces of nature. They were the antagonists in many early Irish cycles, a constant threat to the divine Tuatha De Danann. The discovery of an actual, incredibly tall skeleton in an ancient grave naturally led to excited speculation that this could be physical proof of these legendary beings, a real Fomorian whose existence had been passed down through generations in the form of myth. It's a compelling narrative, the idea that archaeology can sometimes validate the oldest stories a culture tells about itself. However, science offers a more grounded, though no less fascinating, set of possibilities. The most likely explanation is that this individual suffered from a medical condition that resulted in abnormal growth. The most common culprit is a disorder known as pituitary gigantism, which occurs when the pituitary gland produces excessive growth hormone before the growth plates in the bones have sealed. This condition leads to a proportional overgrowth of the entire body, resulting in exceptional height and large, heavy bones. Without modern medical intervention, living with such a condition in the Bronze Age would have been incredibly difficult, likely involving chronic pain, joint problems, and vision issues. The fact that this person lived long enough to reach adulthood and receive a formal burial suggests they were likely a valued member of their community, perhaps protected or even revered because of their difference. This leads us to the most profound question raised by this grave. How was this person viewed by the society that buried them? The presence of the bronze dagger is particularly telling. In the Bronze Age, metal was incredibly valuable, and a weapon was not placed in a grave without reason. It could signify that this individual was a warrior, their great height and strength making them a formidable figure on the battlefield. Imagine the psychological impact of a 7-foot-tall warrior charging into combat. They would have been a living terror, a force that could turn the tide of a skirmish through presence alone. Alternatively, their difference might have marked them for a spiritual role. In many ancient cultures, physical anomalies were not seen as disabilities but as signs of a special connection to the divine or the other world. This person could have been a shaman, a chieftain, or an oracle, someone set apart, whose unusual stature was interpreted as a mark of the god's favor. The careful construction of the stone cist and the inclusion of valuable goods indicates a send-off of respect and significance, not one of fear or ostracization. The tomb of the unknown giant ultimately stands as a powerful reminder that the human past is always more complex and more interesting than simple categorization. It is a puzzle where myth and science intersect. While we can likely dismiss the notion of a literal race of giants, we are left with the reality of a single, extraordinary human being. Their burial is a snapshot of a moment in time where a community encountered something beyond their ordinary experience and chose not to reject it but to honor it. They saw not a monster but a person, a warrior, a leader, or a seer, who walked among them, towering in both body and likely in legacy, leaving behind bones that continue to challenge our assumptions and fuel our imagination thousands of years later. And so our journey through these silent cities of the dead comes to a close, a path that has taken us from the celestial ambitions of the Great Pyramid to the sonic chambers of the Halicarnassus hypogeum, from the golden mask of a boy king to the mercury-laden tomb of China's first emperor. We have stood before monuments built for love, for power, for fear, and for a hope that stretches beyond the very limits of mortality. This incredible diversity, spanning cultures and millennia, reveals one unifying, profound truth. How a society buries its dead is a direct reflection of how it understands life itself. These tombs are far more than just containers for bones. They are the ultimate time capsules, preserving not only art and treasure but the deepest fears and highest aspirations of the people who built them. They show us a humanity perpetually grappling with the great unknown, using every tool at its disposal, stone, gold, ritual, and architecture, to build a bridge across the abyss. Whether it was the Sumerian belief in a court that must follow its ruler into eternity, the Egyptian pursuit of a solar resurrection, or the Han dynasty's attempt to craft immortality from jade, each practice is a unique answer to the same eternal questions. What happens to us when we die? How do we ensure our legacy endures? And how can we honor those who have gone before us? The sheer variety is breathtaking. We find tombs that are hidden and tombs that dominate the skyline, burials that are intimate and those that involve staggering human sacrifice, graves filled with unimaginable wealth and those that speak only of a powerful, simple dignity. This is not a linear progression of ideas but a brilliant global tapestry of belief, woven with threads of hope, power, love, and a deep-seated need to make sense of our own impermanence. Each site we explored is a window into a completely different worldview, a chance to understand what it meant to be human in a different time and place. But the conversation doesn't end here. History is not a closed book. It is a living field of study where new discoveries are constantly rewriting what we think we know. The sealed tomb of the first emperor, the lost grave of Alexander, and the potential chambers still hidden in the Valley of the Kings remind us that the Earth still holds countless secrets, waiting for the right technology, the right moment, or the right curious mind to bring them to light. The past is always present, whispering to us from beneath the sand and stone, inviting us to keep looking, keep questioning, and keep wondering. Now we turn the question over to you. With 25 enigmatic sites behind us, which one captured your imagination the most? Was it the terrifying scale of the first emperor's Terracotta Army standing guard over a toxic secret? The tragic, intimate story of Tutankhamun and his hastily assembled treasures, or perhaps the profound mystery of Newgrange, where a 5,000-year-old tomb perfectly captures the winter solstice sun. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love reading your perspectives and hearing which mysteries resonate with you. And if you've enjoyed this journey into the world's most fascinating tombs, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into history's greatest enigmas. Until next time, keep